All right. Hello, Matthew. How's it going?
How informal.
I know it feels like it's
Going,
been a long time. If it's only been a week, but it feels like I've gone through a lot in the last week. How are you?
yeah, you've been busy traveling, cyber rodeoing, and all that, and
That's right.
yeah, I've been here at home, kind of manning the fort with the kids, and yeah, it has been. It does seem like a lot's happened in just a short weeks since we last done one of these. So
It does.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The rodeo, for anyone who was that was the Giga Factory Austin opening party, and it was really it was fun. I mean, it felt kind of like a carnival or a state fair atmosphere combined with like a museum grand opening. It was it was like it was really interesting because you can learn a whole lot by going into the factory and reading all the stuff, and then next to the factory there's like this like rave like loud party, and then with like 1,000 people. Then there's like downstairs and outside there was like carnival games outside and all kinds of food trucks and cool food, and
A
even like a
petting farm too.
petting farm. There was even a mobile tattoo parlor. Yeah, like
Oh
a real
wow.
tattoo parlor, I
So
think.
where's
Yeah,
the? Did you get the Good Soil Investment logo on your chest or something?
I should have. I should have. I went on the bull. I went on some There was a few mechanical bulls around. I went on one. I posted a video of me falling off of it, trying to get on. I don't know if anyone saw it, but I put it on Twitter. It was very
That'd be great
slippery.
to see. Yeah, Farzad
Yeah,
said he's bummed he missed us or missed me, and he said he saw
yeah.
you twerking. So if anyone has video of that, I'd pay to see it.
Yeah, I ran into Farzad. He's a really cool guy. I ran into a lot of people really neat in person, and I would say the crowd overall, like the cyber rodeo, it was I guess capacity of 15,000. I'm not sure if it was 15,000 or like 12,000, 10,000, but there was many thousands of people. And the factory itself is enormous. It's almost a mile long. It's like 3,900 feet long, about. And it takes a long time to walk through that factory. And read all the signs and try to look at the robots, examine them, what they're doing, and the Giga Press was the coolest. That was the coolest machine or specimen I looked at. It was ginormous.
So
But
so what do you pick up from being there that like I've heard all about the Gigapress and kind of understand intellectually why it's such a big deal. What is it about being there in person that's so much different, or that made such an impression on you?
It's hard to say because I've been to the Fremont factory and the Nevada factory, but I haven't been to other factories of the other car companies. So I can't lie and say, oh, this is superior. I have to take other people's word for it. Like Sandy Monroe, he's been to other factories, and I was on a panel with him the next day at TeslaCon, and he confirmed that it was by far the most, advanced factory human civilization's ever seen and all that stuff. So I got to believe him, I would think, and others. But I have not visited other auto manufacturing factories to see if any of them are like as advanced. But to me, this seems super advanced. It was like just a whole bunch of robots, like in giant
Mhm.
robots and transformer type robots. It was just insane, and they're all like moving in demo mode, sort of, and you just could tell this thing could really ramp up and like produce a ton of cars. Um, the crowd was a mix of, I would say, like, if I had to guess, I would say maybe like 5,000 or a few thousand the employees locally were invited, and maybe some regional employees or something. And then they all had like plus one or plus twos. So a lot of locals. So maybe there was like 5 to 10,000 locals, I would guess. And then maybe like several thousand local Tesla owners were invited. And then it seemed like maybe, from out of town, the people that had tickets, it seemed like were limited. It seemed like most of the people were somewhat local. Out of town might have been less than 1,000, or less than, that's my guess, of the 15,000 would have been out of town people that had actual tickets. But there's a lot of people that didn't have tickets that got in, because of Elon's tweet, and a lot of people who didn't have tickets that tried to go but couldn't get in.
Yeah,
So
it
a mix.
seemed like that was a bit of a mini controversy with some people trying to get in and they couldn't. It was like, well, Elon said. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't take that to mean that it was going to be an open door policy, and
Yeah. I mean,
so
I thought it was like, maybe it was hard to read. It would have been like if you had an extra plus one you wanted to bring, they'd let you in with the extra plus one,
yeah.
maybe. I don't know. But it still was risky. Like there was people that I had met at my hotel that didn't have tickets that were trying to go, and I couldn't get them in, and so I didn't try to really get them to come with me through the gate though. But I had my plus one and we got in. It was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a massive event and massive undertaking. Someone told me, I don't know if this is true, but someone that's a wife of one of the employees there told me it cost $80 million to put that on.
I was wondering about that. I was like, it's got to be at least 10 million for like
Yeah,
all the food and security and like the drone thing they did, and
that was
like,
incredible. 80 million. Yeah, with like all the organizing, all the like that, but it was like very tax deductible or something. It was a big tax deduction of some sort or something. So I don't know, but it was a massive thing. I mean, it was pretty
yeah.
fun. Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it's interesting. You say you don't know what to compare it to with the other automakers' plants. I've actually never been to one of the Tesla plants, but I've spent a decent amount of time in auto plants here in Michigan, both for
Oh
like
wow.
Ford, GM, the main automakers, as well as some suppliers. I've had a variety of jobs over the years where I've had reason to go and visit them, and one of the things that kind of stood out just from watching the video is it's like materials in one side, car out the other, um,
Yeah.
and that's like as efficient as you can be, really. I mean, I spent the whole summer basically working at like a powertrain assembly plant for GM, where they've just got this one site and they work on like transmissions and engines, and then they get the raw materials in, then they make those, and then they ship them to other plants all over the world. Maybe they're in
Oh jeez.
Mexico,
Yeah.
and so it's like it really is amazing just how much having the plants spread throughout. I mean, there's this whole network of tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers and tier 1 suppliers, all throughout the state and all throughout the region, and frankly worldwide. And it's like this whole choreography of trying to get all these different parts together, and then you may have all the parts go into this one GM plant that does one part of it, and then it gets shipped somewhere else to go to the final assembly plant. Um, so not that there's no suppliers for Tesla, like they clearly make some components elsewhere, or are buying some components from other individuals or from other companies. But I think the just extreme supply chain complexity of the other automakers makes them a lot more fragile to the kind of supply chain disruptions that we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
So it's I think it definitely is a huge advantage for Tesla to be able to have it all in like these huge, massive factories, and to be able to sell all the different, or just a very few number of vehicle, or a number of models,
Yeah.
but at tremendous scale.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish we could combine our heads and our experiences together to really have a more comparative, analysis. But I'm sure I'm sure it's way more advanced than the Detroit automaker factories. So yeah. But then the next day was the TeslaCon event, and that was the event put on by like local Tesla fanatics, or I think the Tesla Austin club had put it on at a kind of event center. And there was actually like a couple thousand people for that. And, that day I spent with Dave Lee. We drove around Austin and had lunch with him and his family, which was nice. And then we drove over to that event around 1, and I was on like a little panel of bulls versus hyper bulls. And that was interesting. And then there was some other panels, and it was a contrast for me as an experience because, at the Tesla Cyber Rodeo, hardly anyone recognized me. I also had a hat on and this crazy red, like blazer, like rodeo shirt on, but it was so crowded. But there wasn't a lot of like Tesla fanatic investors there. I mean, there
Oh,
was
really?
maybe some, but it was mostly like local Tesla employees and their plus
Okay.
ones, and most local Tesla owners, and maybe some of them invest, but they don't like watch all our YouTube stuff or whatever. So it was so crowded. A couple people recognized me, a few employees, a few people,
Were you wearing some
but not.
chaps too?
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I wasn't.
Okay.
But then at the Tesla Con, I was like a celebrity for like 4 or 5 hours. It was crazy. Everyone was like, "Oh, Emmet Peppers, blah blah blah," and it was like everyone's like, it was crazy, and it was fun, good experience, and met a lot of people, a lot of the Tesla community that I've met in person before, and that was nice. And flew back the next day. But I did notice one thing. I took home as like a note is that there's actually there's 100,000 Tesla employees right now. That's like
Hmm.
huge. It's so much bigger than it. I remember when it was 50,000. I was like, well, that's big. Now it's 100,000. Is growing still, and a couple of employees told me like, thank you very much for all you do with Dave, and a couple even know Good Soil, but others follow like all the other Tesla channels, and they're just like really thanked me, saying like so many of the Tesla employees watch the YouTube content about Tesla to get a better understanding of the big picture. Because if we didn't do this, they'd just be stuck in their kind of like silo of what they're doing within Tesla, most likely. Like maybe there's opportunities to learn more about it, but for the most part, they might be just in like noise cancellation or some other type of battery chemistry thing or something,
Yeah. But they've
But
got this
because
glass department, which is super advanced, but it's like
yeah,
you're working on glass all day.
yeah, and you're an engineer, you're not a stock investor, right? You're just like an
Yeah.
engineer by trait. Maybe you came out of engineering school. You're not really, but then you learn from the YouTube channels more about Tesla, the company, and the conglomerate, and the incredible investment opportunity it is. And then you participate in the stock incentive program, or you maybe buy shares, and you just get better morale of all the employees. So I think all these YouTube channels that have been put together have been really a big boon for just the Tesla employee morale. Because that was a weakness in the past, or a perceived weakness in the past, I think, is how hard the employees had to work and the turnover and all that. And maybe there still is some, and they still have to work hard, but I feel like all the YouTube content coming out is a good morale.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great to hear, and it definitely makes sense that you're just stuck doing your thing all day. You're not a big investor. It can be, I've seen a lot of people just say, yeah, well, like Tesla, they've done great, they've had a great run, but like really, how can you justify their current price? And so I think you probably do need some people with a little bit more of a kind of finance background or investing acumen to just kind of
Yeah.
talk about where does Tesla go from here, because it's incredibly exciting, but I get why people can be skeptical of the valuation at the current time,
Yeah.
when they're one of the largest companies in the world.
Yeah. I see Farzad just said he was an employee there, as most people know. He's a relatively new Tesla YouTuber, but he said the Tesla YouTube community was crucial during the insane FUD from 2017 to 2019 for the employees. Yeah, I believe that. So the employees are probably seeing all this negative spin in mainstream media, and probably like, what company am I working for if it's going bankrupt? But at the same time, they can get the YouTube content to understand maybe it's not true. So yeah, so that was good to hear. Yeah, anyway, let's kick it off. I mean, that was a good intro, I guess, just to talk about the experience there. But what about the macro market? I mean, we usually have the format of we talk about the macro market, then the more details about the stock and stuff that's meaningful to the actual stock price and other stocks. So I think we're going to talk about the macro market first. What are your thoughts, Matt? I mean, I know you had another discussion with Vooch from the other week. We may or may not have video to post. We're discussing, but at least you have the content. What was your thoughts?
Yeah. So for those who maybe didn't see it, we had Vukovic on the channel 2 months ago, I think, who's a economist by training, PhD, super well versed in macro events right now. He was cautiously optimistic about the market 2 months ago when we spoke, and I think now with the the war in Ukraine and kind of the way that that's reverberating through commodity prices and what that does to inflation, as well as like tying the Fed's hand, I'd say he's kind of switched to cautiously pessimistic. And so, he shared a lot of, he actually like prepared some charts and stuff. So I really hope we have his video somehow. We'll try to see if we can get that uploaded. But if not, we may have to just re-record it at some point. There's been a lot of kind of mixed macro signals, I would say. That we had the 10-year, 2-year Treasury inversion. I think it was last week. They briefly inverted, which a lot of economists view as a sign of an impending recession. But at the same time, you've had other metrics like the 3-month, 18-month, where that spread's actually increasing. And so a lot of folks have been saying, oh, it's hard to kind of read through that. But I think Vuk had a very, I think, clear-headed perspective on digesting why there would be the divergence. Is the biggest thing being like the 3-month essentially follows the FOMC rate increases since it's so short term. So he was saying that kind of divergence makes sense, and we will see a flattening of the shorter term yield curves once the FOMC starts actually changing the Fed funds rate. That was, I thought he had a lot of good points. Supply chain issues with Shanghai shut down. I mean, that really aggravated things. So he kind of threw some cold water on some of the bold theses I've been kind of holding on to a little bit. So, I'm still not convinced that, it's going to be a recession necessarily, but I do think there's maybe reason to pause. It was really interesting. But what's your take with where we are? I mean, we saw a pretty decent rally in the last several weeks, and then it kind of dissipated. In the last couple of weeks of March, then it kind of dissipated, gave out.
Yeah.
Where do you think we go from here? Not
That's a good
investment
question.
advice, but
None of this is
where's the
investment
risks?
advice. There's no, I've been thinking like we're kind of maybe trading somewhat sideways, up and down 5 or 8, maybe even 10%, but kind of somewhat sideways for a little while. That's just my inclination. Volatility will remain, with kind of, but we're not going to see like the 3 to 5% daily moves in the Nasdaq like we saw, I think earlier in the year a few times. I feel like it'll be more like, 1 or 2% moves, 3 days in a row one way, and then 2% move 3 days in a row the other way, or something like that. So that's just my gut. I feel like we're kind of sort of like a rubber band was like pulled, and it was like initially like whoosh, and now it's just kind of like slowly trying to find its center somehow. Um, the the thing I think that people are not expecting is the Shanghai, what ripple effects the Shanghai shutdown is having, the China shutdowns. I mean, for the Tesla Gigafactory and all these suppliers, there's so much production coming from there. Like for that to be shut down for over a month, or like, potentially 2 months now, it's looking like, I don't know. It's like, that's massive. That's like huge supply chain disruptions, and that could lead to further inflationary shock, several months from now. I feel like that's not accounted for yet. Um, if that was not the case, I think we'd be recovering from the initial inflationary shocks from the past 1 or 2 years of supply chain problems, that we're seeing now. So, I'm kind of torn. Like I thought the market would recover like pretty soon, but because of this, I feel like maybe the market's going to just kind of trade sideways, slightly down or slightly up, but it's not going to really recover for a while. Just back to where we were anytime soon. That's just my thought, my gut.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting talking to Vuk about that as well, because he was basically saying that you have the Shanghai supply chain issues, which are a lot worse than anyone was expecting, and then you've also got the impact of the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and what that's doing to wheat prices, what that's doing to oil and natural gas prices, and then kind of how
Yeah.
those are going to take a long time to kind of work their way through the economy as well, and so. It just is going to take a long time, I think, for all these, negative headwinds to really make their way through the economy. And I think it's a fair question of what happens when they finally do, make their way through. So maybe 6 months from now, we start coming out on the other side of some of these things. But where are we by then? I mean, does the Fed need to raise their rates a lot higher, or
Yeah.
is the war in Ukraine still going on or worsening? And
Yeah.
so there's just a lot of uncertainty. But I do kind of agree with you that there's, there doesn't seem to be a short-term catalyst right now.
No. In Shanghai, like I see Alex V in the comments that people are jumping out of buildings in Shanghai. Like, it's hard to know what's going on there. I mean, China like censors the media so well. I don't know what's real, what's not. It's hard. I saw someone post like a riot of people getting past like some police barricades, like a well-known Twitter handle posted it. And then someone else said, no, that's from a different city from like a month ago or something. I don't know. So it's hard to really know. I mean, and people jump out of buildings probably in Shanghai anyway, even without this, just suicides or whatever. So it's hard to know, like, all right, if this person was going to commit suicide jumping out of a building, city of 25 million people or whatever, it's probably a couple of suicides anyway. And is it increased by how much? Is it hundreds of people jumping out now, like in the last week, or is it just like the normal suicide? So it's hard to know how things can get spun in the day of social media, what's really going on the ground in Shanghai. It's a big unknown to me, but something worth keeping an eye on. The longer this shutdown goes on, the more likely I feel like there could really be some problems going there. So I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jay in Shanghai is one of the accounts I've been following for a while, just from his Tesla coverage, and
Mhm.
he's been kind of fighting back some of the he's calling it FUD of like mass suicides and starvation and sort of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, that makes me cautiously optimistic. I've heard these rumors. I'm not sure if they're true, but that the government is planning to open up like 40% or more of the city. But I feel like I have to discount those reports as well, because there's not a free press in China. So it's like, I mean, you or I, if we were reporting on what was going on here, we'd be free to say exactly what's going on here. But
Or would we with Twitter? I don't know. We'll get into that in a second. Anyway, go on.
but there's definitely a very pronounced, I think, hesitancy to criticize the government in China. And I actually, strange story, but I was in the like Forbidden City, like right in Tiananmen Square, probably 10 years ago, and there were protests that came out of nowhere. Like, I don't know what they were protesting. I was on like a school trip. It was probably 15 years ago, actually, now that I think about it. But these like people were like throwing up flyers, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And then like these people, these like soldiers came out of nowhere, and within like 2 minutes, the protesters were gone. All the pamphlets were gone. And I was like, well, what happened? And our tour guide refused to say anything. And my professor, even once we got back to the United States, just refused to talk about it. And I was like, you're safe here. Like, you're, you know, in the United States, like, you can tell us what happened or what they were protesting. And she refused to.
Wow.
So I do think it's you know, worth viewing reports that things are going well in Shanghai with a little bit of skepticism as well.
Yeah. And do you think the Tesla Giga Shanghai factory shutdown is priced in already? I mean, that's something we talk about sometimes. You know, what do you think?
It's hard to say. I got the sense maybe last week that most people didn't realize how severe the situation was. But then, you know, we started off the week, what with it, like 4.5% downturn on Monday yesterday, something like that. So, you know, to me, that was like, okay, the market's trying to price this in. Because even if it was down for like half of Q2 or something like that, and maybe not up to, you know, full capacity thereafter, that's still a short-term thing. Like, of course, it's a big deal, but to me, that doesn't justify the stock going down, say, like 30% or something like that. Even if it was more pronounced, like all of Q2 or for like half a year or something like that, of course, that would be terrible news. Their earnings for this year would take a huge hit. There's no way around that. But then it would recover. Whenever we get through this, it would recover. So what's the right amount for the uncertainty of that situation right now? I don't know. I mean, down 10% maybe seems prudent. And you could argue that we're there. Maybe we can give up another 5% or something like that. But to me, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, you know, it'll be bittersweet, this earnings report, I feel like, coming up on April 20th. It'll be, you know, a good marker for like how much more revenue Tesla can produce, margins are maybe improved from the previous quarter. I don't know. I forget what our model said exactly. I think we were estimating like 275 or something. So I think it'll be a good marker on one hand, but on the other hand, it's going to be the guidance for the quarter is going to be disappointing. But I think that's going to be expected, obviously, by that time. It should be. I feel like it's sort of, we're in the midst of that being priced in right now. I mean, even though sell side analysts haven't changed their estimates, I feel like all the buy side folks, the people that actual institutions that buy and sell the actual stock, you know, must be aware of what's going on in Giga Shanghai right now, and have made their adjustments, I would think. But, you know, who knows if it continues. I mean, maybe it's priced in to be shut down till April 15th. But now if it, like someone's saying, might be shut down till May 15th, you know, worst case, or what if it gets shut down all of May too, or something, you know, it could just get worse. We could lose like a whole quarter of production out of Giga Shanghai, you know, worst case, maybe, who knows? And that's not priced in yet. So we'll just have to pay close eye on it and get updates continuously. I think today was the first day it was not a record of cases in Giga Shanghai. Like there was like 10 or 12 days in a row of record increasing cases. So today's the first day where it wasn't, I think I saw. So that's a good sign. It's a good piece of information, and we'll have to follow that closely on the ground there, because Tesla Giga Shanghai is like, you know, more than half of all Tesla production and margins. It's like shut down. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely more than half the margins. I mean, if it's
probably
clearly
2/3 of the margin,
than
maybe 3/4 of the margins. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, the good news is that we've got Berlin and Austin ramping up right now, but those are going to be pretty terrible margins to begin with. So, I mean, we could very well have a massive gross margin hit in Q2 if this drags on. So, lot to watch for. But honestly, I can't help thinking it could create an opportunity as well. I mean, there's a great corollary we have to, Q2 of 2020 when Fremont was shut down for, way
Yeah.
longer than people were expecting. Stock took an absolute beating. I forget what it was, down like 30-40%, I want to say, something like that. And I mean, I remember I bought the dip at that point because I took a deep dive into deliveries, and the analysts were essentially way overreacting to how bad it was going to be and how long it would
Yeah.
take them to ramp back up. And I ended up buying some short-term options at that time and did like really, really well in it because that was a definite V-shaped recovery. So, if we do get a huge reaction down, I mean, I could imagine the stock takes a somewhat decent hit the next quarter or two. You could imagine a scenario where Q2 earnings print and they're just a total disaster for all the reasons we just spoke about, and the stock reacts. Well, that may be a good opportunity, a good buying opportunity as well. So,
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to be cautious in the short term, but these are all definitely short-term problems. And I mean, look at the demand, look at the new capacity coming online, which will, even if these events are prolonged, that will definitely
It's kind
provide
of
a buffer.
it's a dilemma because like over the second half of the year is going to be monstrous. It's going to be a monster the second half of the year. The short term is very uncertain, and it's a dilemma because on one hand, if you're so like I'm so personally invested in Tesla, I'm like, man, there's going to be such a big opportunity for the second half of the year. If it dips, I should get ready for it and maybe sell some of my Tesla stock and put it in cash. Or I could buy a ton of like medium term options once it dips 25% from where it is now or something. But on the other hand, if I sell stock right now, not only is there tax consequences for lots of us who've owned it for a while, but the stock might not dip much more. Maybe it's all priced in. You just
Yeah.
sold and it's going to come back up to like 1,000 plus and stay above 1,000 again for a while. So it's a dilemma. So it's like, it's hard to decide. If I had more dry powder I was waiting on, I'd keep. If I already had dry powder on the sidelines, I'd just keep it and wait to see when it dips and then buy. So anyway, what do you think about the Twitter thing? This is a big thing. We got to get to the Twitter stuff. What do you think about Elon and Twitter? I mean, what are your thoughts on this, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it seems to me is so that that plan he had to get the board seat was essentially capping him at like 14% ownership, and sounds like, reading between the lines a little bit, like playing nice in the sandbox was kind of what they wanted him to do.
Yeah.
So I think that was like a reasonable thing that he was trying to do. But my sense is, like, the more he's spent time with like the management and the board, the more he's like, what's wrong with these people? Like,
Yeah.
I was listening to the All In podcast, and they said something to the effect of, like, Elon's got all the worst people at Twitter really like up in arms.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think he's, my sense is he's taking a little bit more of a hostile approach because playing nice is not going to get the results around free speech that are super important to him. So I'm personally happy about that. I mean, if I am reading that situation correctly, because I think the free speech issue is super important. So I do think they Twitter maybe needs to go through a painful period of some internal conflict to get to a point where they're acting a little bit more responsibly around free speech. So that's kind of my view of the situation. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think Elon, like you said, read the tea leaves pretty quickly in there. He replied to that one video exactly of that guy posted about Carl Icahn's story of doing a takeover and having to fire like all of the New York City offices. And I think Elon's coming to that realization that there's just lots of like an organization like Twitter that's been around, tech organization like that's been around for a couple of decades almost now, I think. But there's tons of barnacles, that's the way I think of it. Because I think he used that term barnacles in the past when he was referring to like all kinds of like weird contractors kind of accumulating within Tesla and some of the ramps. And I feel like the barnacles are much more ingrained in Twitter now. And you have probably whole departments set on like some weird obscure policy, for example, that like it never comes into play. It's probably out of control. Like the amount of like wokeism that has been built up into departments at Twitter, for example, and some of these people are in senior positions, and there's just a lot of, I think the best way is just rip the Band-Aid off and do a takeover, organize a group of shareholders, kind of gut keep the core technology, gut much of the key personnel that aren't in full agreement with adjusting to what Elon and his team thinks needs to be done to make it more a better asset for human civilization than it is now. Like, I think Elon has said it numerous times, and Dave Lee references that Elon takes the course of actions that are most probable to be good for the future of humankind, or something like that, right? And I think he sees this Twitter as, the new age town square, and the free speech is a real threat. The censorship has become a real threat, and he feels like this needs to be done to prevent, disaster later if Twitter does become a bigger piece of public square, and all of a sudden it's more censored, and like all Republicans are, censored and can only say certain things, for example, or whatever it is. It could be run by so many leftist extremists, for example, that they just say, who knows? Or it could be the other side. Maybe a bunch of people on the right take it over. I don't know. And like say all the left, but there needs to be the censorship really needs to be like about it before, like a sitting president censoring. That was like a big sign. Like, I don't know how people didn't wake up to that fact. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I was complaining about it at the time. Some people were, but a lot of people in the Bay Area thought it was the right thing to do. And I'm like, man, it's crazy. It's people need to, I think, look at the forest from the trees on this one.
Yeah. And Jason Calacanis had a tweet which like kind of blew my mind. Apparently Twitter has this like monthly day of rest where the employees don't work, and I guess yesterday was this like day of rest. It sounds like a joke to me, but like they've got this Monday off because it's their day of rest. And Elon apparently wanted to like address the employees today, and you could just imagine that conversation, right? Like, Parag says, like, "Oh, hey, Elon, like, we really value your input, and want to look forward to working in a proactive way together to build a healthier Twitter. But could we reschedule our Monday meeting to Tuesday because our employees have a day of rest?" And Elon's like, "No, like, you have a day of rest? What are you talking about?" Like, I could just imagine him be like, "No, like, tell the employees to get it. Like, this is important. This can't wait. Like, let's get on board." And then like the employees are getting all up in arms, and then I could imagine Elon be like, "If you need to protect your day of rest, then I'm going to go in there and fire 12 floors of people like the Carl Icahn." Like,
he can rest every day after that. Yeah,
it seems like he's ready to take his flamethrower to the place, and that's probably going to be a super messy process, but I think it's probably going to be a good thing. Overall.
And this is the capital market. This is a free world, free market system. Like, your job is not. Like, you don't work in the government, like you work at a private company or public company, and departments can be laid off or fired. Like, this is the real world. People need to like understand that it's not like you're kicking people out of their houses or something. It's like,
right.
I think we got a little too crazy thinking like, oh no, he's going to lay off all these people. That's so terrible. That's how the market works. It's and then back when censorship was happening, Twitter executives were like, well, we're a private company, so we can censor who we want, and that's how we're not owned by we're our own company, and now that's how the free market works. So you can build your own if you want. And now that Elon's taken over, some of these Twitter executives are upset, but you could tell them like, hey, this is a free market. People can take over your company. You can go build your own version of it again if you want, and it goes both ways. Yeah,
it does. And I don't mean to make light at all of like, of course it's a very sad and unfortunate thing when people lose their jobs. But I think you also have to keep in mind, like, are they doing the right thing? Are they growing the company the way they should? And I think you could argue just on the state of their monetization and their technology stack, like how slow they are to roll out new features and how terrible most of the new features that they roll out really are. Like, I forget the one that they rolled out like a year ago, but it's like, they're pretty, for like a tech company, they're pretty bad at, a lot of their monetization and their growth and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit just on like the business side that, Elon or whoever could work to address in a more meaningful way to create more shareholder value. So even if you take the politics or the free speech out of it, I think there's reason to root for, some sort of opening the windows, let a little fresh air, and rearrange some stuff in the company, because they frankly haven't done much in the last decade.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I've never been more excited about the prospects of Twitter's future than I am right now. You know, if Elon was to back out, I'd be very disappointed, but I don't think that's going to be the case. The fact that I feel like, going to stick with it and make something happen, I'm so excited about Twitter's future.
Yeah.
You know, and so
So
we'll see.
yeah, they
You know,
did have. I was kind of thinking, he might be accumulating more of a share, and maybe trying to file some proxy statements. Twitter did file their proxy statement this morning for shareholder motions that are going to be voted on at the upcoming shareholder meeting, which I think is in May. And there did not appear to be anything around free speech or something that smelled like it would have been a proposal by Elon. So I don't know if it's too late for him to try to do something like that, but at least with this this form that was filed with the SEC this morning, there was definitely nothing kind of significant in there that had Elon's fingerprints on it.
yeah, interesting. So it could be early days still. So good. All right. Well, I guess we should just go to some Q&A unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about. We talk about Twitter. I mean, yeah, I mean the stock is another story. We're just talking about Twitter, the company. We're not talking a lot about the stock. Maybe another time we'll talk about the stock. But I guess unless you have anything else, we'll just go to Q&A. What do you think? I see a lot of comments in a lot of people seem to be taking issue with our free speech, or and other stuff. Anyway, everyone's got their opinion, I guess, and people are free to disagree with us. That's okay. That's what free speech is all about. So I appreciate seeing people's feedback when they disagree too. So, all right, let's go to the questions, I guess. Brooke Chen, how much time do you think Musk will devote to Twitter? I think right now is the most time he's going to be committing to it, just to organize his plans. Maybe it's, I don't know, 5 to 20% of his time right now. I'm guessing somewhere in that range, I'd guess. But in the future, long term, if he does take a bigger role, I would think it's under 10% of his time. I don't know. That's my guess. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be very much at all. I mean, I think he's going to, try to make some changes, but I don't think he's going to be the one necessarily trying to implement them. So, I mean, clearly he's having conversations with, the board and with Prague over the weekend. I'm sure some of that will continue in the short term, but I don't think this is going to be long term more than like 5 hours of his week, if even that. So I don't think he's going to play an active role other than maybe trying to shake things up in the short term.
Yeah. From Alan Court from Finance Videos. Question: what is the max percentage of a portfolio that you would consider safe to be used for stock options? Yeah, that's a good question. It came up a lot when I was at the Tesla Con. A lot of people, said thank you, Emmet, for talking about the S&P 500 inclusion bet. I made a lot of people made a lot of money off of that trade doing the same thing, I guess, that I did. And they were like, yeah, it was amazing. I did the same thing after you said it and it worked great, blah, blah, blah. And it made me think like, there's a lot of people that, and these people, like, they wouldn't have otherwise done it if they didn't see someone on social media talk about it, probably. Right. So there's a lot of people that are just looking for excuses to take gambles with call options, and the excuses, like me included, but I try to use my own judgment. But I think there's a lot of people that just follow other people, and that's dangerous, So I think options, if you're just kind of experimenting with them, it's best to really fully understand what the profit and loss could be of the option, the performance profile. It's, I guess, what we call it, or we see it in the Interactive Brokers platform. But I would not do more than, like, personally, I've said it before, like maybe just 10% of my play money, put it in a separate pool of money and experiment with some options. So the most I could lose is that 10% of that play money, not my savings, not 10% of my savings, but 10% of like my play money, which is a percentage of the savings that I could lose and be okay with, for example. So like a very small percent, that's what I personally did early on to kind of get comfortable. And I think, I mentioned it's dangerous. Options, if you have a gambling mentality, it can be very dangerous. So you have to really set hard rules for yourself. And I don't know, Matt, do you have anything to add?
I think there's a huge variety of different factors that can change this over time. I mean, in 2019, I put almost all of my portfolio into like deep out of the money call options, which was like seemed like an incredibly risky
Wow.
thing to do. I
Yeah.
mean, in like
Yeah.
99% of scenarios, like that as a recipe for like just getting your portfolio destroyed. But it was all play money for me really at that point. So it
Yeah.
was,
As long as it's play money. Yeah.
I had my 401k, and then I had this very like small little like side thing for investments that I was doing, at the time. And that was, like 5% of my 401k or something like that. So it was like, all right, well, I feel super strongly convicted about this. And so like, if I'm right, then like, it would feel stupid to, give up like a 300x upside when, if the stock did what I thought it would do, then I'd have like a 4x on the equity. So
And was that the first
those
time you ever was it the first time you ever experimented with options, or you've done some options before that?
Yeah, I mean, I was familiar with options before then, just from my finance
Okay.
background.
So that wasn't like
But
your first time. Okay. But you'd been using it a little bit in the
well,
past.
it was no, it was the first time I'd actually invested in options.
Oh, okay.
I'd only invested in stocks before then, but I was familiar with how to value options and that sort of thing just from my professional career. But I thought it was like a good way to lose money. But then you have a once in a lifetime opportunity where you think you see something that the market doesn't, and the options were cheap. Then I went heavy, but it doesn't matter whether it's a big or a small portfolio. In my mind, it's what are you comfortable losing.
Hmm.
So that's one question I would definitely ask, and the other is how risky are the options? Because there's a huge difference between like deep out of the money call options or buying something that's deep in the money because you want a little extra leverage without going on margin. So that's a reasonable thing to do. I think is to
Yes. There's
if
different
you want to double
ways to do it.
your delta dollar exposure, but you don't want to take on margin and like risk losing your house or something like that, then I think it's definitely reasonable to just buy some deep in the money call options as well.
Yeah, it's funny. There's lots of different ways to do it. The way I do it with just buying call options for leverage, yeah, I do it with a small percentage. But if you're doing other things and you're knowledgeable about it, you could, do it with more. If you're doing covered calls, for example, or selling puts to get into positions, lots of
Yeah.
different things. We're talking to a chess grandmaster in a week or two who does kind of a covered call strategy that's more medium or longer term than what Matt and I have done. So we'll go over that kind of mindset in a week or two on one of our interviews. So stay tuned for that. Let's go to the next question from Venice. Do you think Tesla will make the Tesla bot cheap enough for the masses from the first release? Or do you think it will be super expensive and targeted for the upper class? There's been a lot of analysis. Normally with the cars, they start upper class for margin, but they don't need to do that for the bot. They don't need to make it super expensive initially. I mean, they might, but my guess is under 50,000, maybe 10 or 20,000 for the bot, but then you have to buy the software to upgrade it. That's how they'll make a lot of money. That's my guess. What do you think, Matt?
I don't know. I think it's going to be a very slow rollout. I think I'm probably a little bit more pessimistic on the time frame than you are around this, but I'm
Mhm.
kind of expecting something like what we've seen with Solar Roof, where they've got like a version 1 of the bot, and it like kind of sucks, and it's like not widely produced, and it's probably all internally Tesla for the first couple of years, I would think, and then I think they'll probably have like a version 2 and a version 3, and it'll take way longer than they think, and then maybe like version 4 is 2026 or something like that, and that's the one where it's like a real game changer, and it's $20,000, and they've got huge margins on it from software, like you said. But I think they're probably going to intentionally limit production a little bit, or just price it so high because they know they've got to they want to get like the mass, they want to get to the mass production product as soon as possible, and that probably means like shuffling through a couple different like iterations of it that aren't great first. So that's kind of what I think.
Yeah. I think it's going to make a lot of money with software. And I don't know, maybe Tesla just leases out the bots to people. I don't know if they'll like sell them directly. They might just build them
That's an interesting idea. I like
yeah.
that.
I've been thinking about that. They could just build them and lease them to people for a year at a time or 2 years at a time. Yeah, it's just a month at a time. I don't know. But next question. Let's see. From Evan Glansman, question: do you think Model Y ramps in Austin and Berlin similar to Shanghai, or do you think it may be faster ramp after having more experience producing Model Y lines? I think I differ with a lot of people on this. I differ with Dave, and I think with you too, Matt. But I think it's going to be slower, much slower than Shanghai. I just don't see, even though Texas is a much freer state than California, there's still lots of regulations and permits and all this stuff that just is a lot slower than China. And people are not, the work ethic of people in the United States, even in Texas, which might be the most, let's say even that's the hardest work ethic state of the country. I have no idea, but I just think the work ethic in China is probably off the roof higher than the U.S. That's just my observation. But I could be wrong, but I just think it's not going to be as fast. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. The other thing with Austin in particular is like the 4680 is a brand new thing that they've not figured out yet, how to do that at scale. That they've clearly been doing like the pilot line at Cato Road for a while, but by Elon's own comments last week, like this is going to take a while for them to ramp up that battery production there. So to the extent that's a limiting factor on production, that could definitely slow things down relative to Shanghai. Yeah, I think it's probably generally going to be a bit slower.
Yeah. I mean, the machine technology is more advanced, maybe than Shanghai. It's like a step change further, like the Giga presses. I guess they have the Giga presses in Shanghai, I think now too, but they have probably more advanced machinery, and they've learned a lot from the lines, how to make it more efficient. So there is that on the side of Berlin and Austin, kind of helping them ramp a little more efficiently or faster, but I don't think that offsets everything else we've talked about. From Next Big Future on YouTube, do you think that Elon could buy 50% of Twitter and fold it in within Starlink and Tesla Eve?
What is Tesla
Make it
Eve?
part of, I don't know, make it part of a billion plus user larger plan. I don't think Elon's going to buy 50% of Twitter or 51% of Twitter. I think he could buy 25 or 30% and get a conglomerate of other folks on his side to buy the other 20 or 30% to make sure they have over 50% voting power to do what they want. And they'll like elect Elon to be the controller. I that's how I see it playing, like sort of like Elon raising money for SpaceX. If Elon's involved, he could raise money in a pinch to do what he thinks is going to be $1 trillion. So if he can put the vision out there of turning Twitter into $1 trillion company, if you can just sell that vision to venture firms, they're going to say, oh, we want to buy in. Oh, you know what? You buy in instead of on the private markets, you got to buy the Twitter stock, and then you can buy in. Anyone can, but here I'm telling you, this is my vision. I could see that happening, and a bunch of people just buying in to get a piece of this vision that Elon could present. What do you think?
Yeah,
man?
like he's got so much more power than Parag, who's on paper in charge of Twitter, right? Like,
yeah. I don't even know what Parag's history is. He's just an MBA that's like worked his way up. I don't know. I'm sure he's a capable guy, but so are 300 million other people in the United States. There's only one Elon Musk. Anyway, go on.
Right? Yeah. I don't really know his background, but I was like looking at his profile the other day. He's got 500,000 followers on Twitter, like the company he's in charge of, and Elon has 81 million. So like, I think even with Elon's 9.1% stake, he could probably just say, hey, Twitter followers, anyone who owns Twitter stock, let's vote to remove like the following 4 people from the board, remove the CEO, and here's my plan to, increase shareholder value. And like, then, of course he'd have to like have a law firm or whatever do like the formal board proposal. But I would imagine he's got the pull to like, like his recommendation for any proxy statement would have way more pull than the board of directors own recommendation.
Thank goodness he did not get on that board of directors. That signals to me like he can be much more flexible. He can do a lot more stuff. If he was on that board of directors, he'd be so constricted. He'd be like, everything he say would be scrutinized. Be like, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. It'd just be a nightmare. So I think that was so good in retrospect that he's not part of that.
Yeah, I agree. Like I was reading Parag's. Did you read his like statement over the weekend of like why Elon's not joining the board? And it was just like, it was all this like MBA speak that it just reminded me of my old corporate job and wanting to pull my hair out because I was like, I can't say what I really mean. But like he didn't say anything real. He was just like saying like, well, we have challenging times ahead, and we think it's for the best, but this is not the end. I'm like, what the hell are you actually saying? Just like use like plain English. So,
I know. And they're gonna do. They're in the mix, like the background check on Elon. Why don't you even throw that in there? Like
oh gosh, I know. Like
that
it's
was
just
such a
painful
blunder. Such a blunder.
to read that stuff. Like
Yeah.
after like being out of the corporate world for so long, and then just seeing the way that Elon
Oh
communicates,
my
I'm like,
God.
okay, yeah, he's painting a very clear vision. And then you contrast that
Yeah.
with everyone at Twitter right now, and it's just like, oh gosh, like
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
let's open the door a little bit, get some fresh air in there.
I know. I know. Yeah, I'm very excited about the future of Twitter. With this happening. So it could be a bumpy road for a little while, but long term, Elon, makes things amazing. So, all right. From Martin Muldoon, if Rocket Lab catches the rocket at the end of this month, do you think that will move the stock? I don't think it will. I think it's kind of it'll be a nice feather in their cap, something new they did that they executed on. It's going to be cool to watch, and there'll be some retail investors that are like, "Oh, that's awesome, buy the stock," but I don't see it move. I don't think it moves the needle for any institutional buyers. It's just, but that's my thought. I'd love to be wrong. We have a lot
Yeah.
of Rocket Lab, but I just don't think it will. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, like I don't know. I think to the extent it grabs headlines and like I don't know if
Mhm.
CNBC did the thing on
That's
it, I can see
true.
that
Yeah.
moving the stock a little bit. But I think it's mostly like that would be the wrong reason to move the stock, to be honest with you. But like I had this tweet thread a while ago, just about how misunderstood I think the space market is for these publicly traded space companies.
Yeah.
And like frankly, this shouldn't move the stock because it's a very small kind of direction in reuse. It's a good thing for sure, but it's not like it's very highly likely to succeed based on all the testing they've already done. So it shouldn't really come as a surprise. Um, but I think this is my view of Rocket Labs. It's going to be kind of a slow burn for the market to kind of understand
Yeah.
who are the real winners and the real losers, and like which companies actually have a technology edge to compete in the long term. And Rocket Lab
Yeah.
clearly has that, but I don't think that the market's just going to wake up all of a sudden and the stock's going to be up 20% because they caught a rocket on a helicopter.
Yeah. The neutron, I think, would be meaningful. Like once they get that neutron out, what is that, 2 years out before they probably launch their first one, something like that.
Might
So
be probably closer to 3, I think, but
yeah.
they might have a prototype in 2 years.
Yeah, so that's a catalyst, I think. Once they launch the first neutron and it's successful, if they do it a few times, especially, I think that would be a catalyst because that would, put them in a new class. But even leading up to that, might be a catalyst. But there's all kinds of space services they're kind of engaging in now, and that picture might become clearer to space enthusiast investors over time, I think. And yeah, we'll just have to see. It's a longer term bet, but we think it's one in our view that we like a lot.
Yeah.
From H. Kvitvik, question: assuming Elon Musk intends to increase his stake in Twitter to take control, how do you think he would go about doing this? I think he just buy it in the open market, like kind of randomly. I was thinking about this morning. I think like when he put that plan in to sell the shares of Tesla, and it was kind of like randomized for over like 2 months or whatever. I think that he liked that systematic kind of approach, and my guess is there could be a similar systematic approach for him accumulating Twitter shares if he does it. Like I don't think he would do it in one day, but maybe like one day next week Twitter pops like $2 and we're like, what's going on? Or when the rest of the market's flat or something, and then the next day it's like Elon bought 3% more stake or something in Twitter or something, and then 2 weeks later another 3%. That's just my gut guess, but that's how I think he would accumulate a higher percentage. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, if that's what he did with Tesla, I don't see why he would do it differently for Twitter. I have thought there's maybe a possibility that he could do a pipe deal, private investment in public equity. So if he elects to kind of transact with some large institutional holder or something like that to buy their share, that's within the realm of possibility, I think. But I think it's more likely that he'll just do it on the open market, kind of like he did divesting his Tesla shares.
Yeah, he's got the top investment bankers in the world catering to him, screaming for his business any way that they can. So I'm sure they're presenting him with all possible options that, and maybe there's options we're not even thinking of that'll be more efficient. So from Brian M, do you think Tesla will get into the mining business and use Tesla bot so it can train, learn on that project to help with Mars eventually. That's a good point. I mean, I do think he seems to be leading in that direction, that they are going to get into the mining business. I would put it more probable. If I had to put odds, I'd say it's like 60% at this point that they're going to get in the mining business somehow. The fact that he talked about it, and it could be a good use case for the bot maybe in a few years. Yeah, that's true. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that application, but to me, it definitely makes sense. That could be a great training ground. One, it's a kind of nasty job, depending on what you are mining, but you can kind of prevent some human health issues if you're having bots do that sort of thing. And yeah, that working in a hostile environment like that would be great training for Mars. So to me, it makes sense.
From Alex V, have you guys looked at ASTS? Is that Ad Astra? What ASTS? I think so. Let me see here. ASTS.
AST Space Mobile.
Space Mobile. Oh, is that the? I hadn't looked at that.
I looked into them once. I don't remember much about them, to be honest with you, but I remember briefly looking at them. I don't even remember what they do right now.
Yeah. So is that like a competitor to Starlink, maybe, like of some sort? I feel like I looked at them once, and it was like some kind of competition to the service Starlink's going to be providing. But yeah, I don't know much.
Space-based cellular broadband network for mobile phones. That's right. So I think they do like 3G or something like that. I forget exactly what it is, but
yeah.
We're not experts in them.
Yeah, they got a 1.8 billion valuation. I see there, and over the last few years since they went public, it was a SPAC, I think, and it's kind of gone up to $20, and now it's at $9, right around $9. It went down to like almost $5 a few months ago, and now it's like $9. So yeah, I'm not sure who the management team or founders are. I'd want to start there, obviously, if I was going to look at them. And let's do one more question since it's about 10:30 here. From Jupiter James, could Elon take Twitter private? That is a possibility. I think they'd have to do some kind of corporate action. There'd be, all the Twitter, if you got enough ownership, I guess that's possible. And so that's something we've talked about a little bit, Matt. It's a possibility. We don't think it's probable, but it's certainly possible. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, how would he do it? I mean, you could imagine him maybe doing it via, SpaceX or one of his other companies, but to me, that doesn't seem like a natural kind of meshing way to do it. So I think it's unlikely. He'd have to actually buy out Twitter like on a cash basis. He'd have to sell some more Tesla stocks. So I think that's kind of unlikely. So yeah, and I don't think that's a very probable scenario.
So yeah, we don't think it's probable. But one funny quick story about that possibility. Like I remember Tesla when he said, "I'm taking Tesla private at 420," and Tesla was at like it was in the 300s around then, I think, and then it zipped up like $50 on it. I forget how much it zipped up, but it went up a lot from like, let's say like 300 to 350. I forget exactly how much it went up, but it went up significantly on that announcement. I had like a whole bunch of 450 strike option calls, like a whole bunch for like a year out, like they were long term, 1 or 2 years out. And at first, when he said it, I was like, I saw those option calls. The market didn't know how to react to it for like a few minutes, because at first it was weird that the stock went up and the delta on the options was like 0.25 or whatever it was, and so the options went up like 20% or whatever, or 50%, or I can't remember. But then after, I guess the market makers figured out like, hey, this 420 private means that this 450 call option will be worthless. The options went from like $50 to worth like $5, like in like a day, like within the same day.
Wow.
And I was like, holy crap, why did this is really bad for me now. Like if he takes it private, because all my call options, which was like half my Twitter holdings at the time, became close to worthless.
Tesla holdings, right?
Yeah, all my Tesla holdings. Sorry. Freudian slip. But yes, I'm just saying, like the same thing could happen. If you think the same thing could happen to Twitter, like Elon's going to take it over, it's going to make it $1 trillion company. Be careful about if he takes it private, your $120 call option or whatever, if you buy that could become worthless. So that's the lesson I learned, is like, be careful of that risk that most people don't realize when they're buying the long-term call options.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, when you especially when a merger is like announced and the deals are likely to go through, like you can see the stock like stabilizes within a very tight range then, and the options values get stabilized too, and the ones above
Based
that,
on that price.
the deal price go to zero, so or very close to it. So it's definitely a risk. I would caution against anyone going too aggressively on that.
Going YOLO on Twitter options. Yeah, long-term Twitter options. Be careful.
Ekapop has a comment in here. I can see Elon tweet, I'm considering taking Twitter private at $69, funding secured.
And he might take out the W by action. I think he'd probably on purpose take out the W and make it titter. I'm taking titter just because of the edit button and stuff. You know, it's funny.
Yeah.
Someone said he's taking out the W because it stands for woke. I saw that in the comments earlier.
I did see that too.
That's interesting.
Yeah, people are picking up on all sorts of things I hadn't thought of in these comments. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's funny. So anyway, that's a good chat, Matt, and we'll be back next week. And looking forward to see what happens with Tesla and Twitter, and hopefully Shanghai's. We got good news on Shanghai by a week from now. We'll see. Knock on wood. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks everyone.